Nobody asked if you were okay. They just noticed how well you handled everything. They called you mature, responsible, strong, and you learned to wear it like a compliment. But those words weren't praise. They were permission. Permission to keep asking more of a child who had no choice but to deliver. You weren't celebrated. You were convenient. There's a child who grows up in a home where the floor is always shifting, where the air carries a weight only they can feel. And because no one else steps up, they do. They learn to read a room before they can read a chapter book, to manage a mood before they know how to manage their own feelings. They become the calm in someone else's storm, long before they're old enough to drive. Psychology calls this parentification. You might just call it your childhood. Not every child responds the same way. Genetics, temperament, and even one supportive adult can shift the trajectory significantly. But for many, the pattern holds. The world sees wisdom, capability, strength. What it doesn't see is that none of it was a choice. You weren't mature, you were adapting. Here's what the research suggests. When children are exposed to chronic stress, the brain adapts to survive, often at the expense of its expected developmental path. Think of a smoke alarm installed too early, set too sensitive. In a calm house, it sits quietly in the background. But in a house that burns often enough, it fires constantly. Not because something is always wrong, but because it was calibrated in a home where something usually was. That's what chronic early stress may do to the threat detection system. Longitudinal studies associate it with faster pruning in regions governing reasoning and emotional regulation. The amygdala, the brain's smoke alarm, appears to mature more rapidly in some stressed children, becoming quicker to trigger and slower to settle. These effects vary. Resilience factors can meaningfully buffer the impact. But for many, the research suggests the nervous system ends up calibrated for threat rather than calm. Brilliant under pressure. Struggling to trust that silence is safe. If you've ever felt uncomfortable on a peaceful Sunday afternoon, restless, waiting for something to go wrong, that may be exactly why. The alarm is still running. The house is just different now. Everyone marvels at their empathy. They feel tension before a word is spoken. They know someone is upset before that person does. They anticipate, smooth over, fix. Research suggests this isn't simply a gift. For many, it's a capability forged by necessity rather than nature. Psychologists call this hyper-attunement, chronic emotional scanning rooted in learned vigilance. When a child's environment is unpredictable, reading a caregiver's mood stops being a social skill and becomes a safety strategy. Over years of repetition, that scanning turns automatic, exhausting, and nearly impossible to switch off. You rehearse conversations before having them. You over-apologize for things that aren't your fault. You catch the exact moment someone's tone shifts, and your body responds before your mind catches up. That's not emotional intelligence. That's a nervous system still running an old security system. In adulthood, many become the ones who hold everything together. At work, they're the fixer, dependable, relentless, capable under pressure. In relationships, research suggests some gravitate toward people who need rescuing, not out of weakness, but because being needed feels like safety, like love. Because that may be the earliest template they were given. This isn't universal. Some withdraw entirely, building walls instead of carrying others. Trauma doesn't produce one type of person, but many share this, absorbing everyone else's emotions, struggling to receive help without guilt, performing competence so convincingly that no one thinks to check on them. Here's the reframe. Staying alert, staying useful, staying small. These were never character flaws. They were intelligent adaptations to an environment that demanded them. The problem isn't that these responses formed, it's that the environment changed and they didn't. What protected the child is now quietly limiting the adult. They didn't lose their childhood. It was quietly borrowed and never returned. Underneath the hyper-independence and the crisis calm, there may still be a child waiting, still working, still trying to earn the right to just rest. The world called you an old soul. But here's what that meant. A child who carried weight that was never theirs to hold, who became fluent in everyone else's pain because their own wasn't safe to feel, who grew up not because they were ready, but because someone needed them to be. That realization isn't a wound, it's a door. Healing doesn't begin by dismantling your strength. It begins with one radical shift, directing inward even a fraction of the care you've spent a lifetime giving away. Notice what you need. Name it. Let that be enough for today. The most courageous thing someone like you can do isn't to hold more together. It's to finally, slowly, put some of it down. You deserved someone to take care of you, and for the first time, that someone can be you.